Why would a man who barely knew me leave me a castle in the middle of nowhere? The key weighed heavier than it should have. It sat in my hand like a dare ornate cold, with a strange kind of gravity. I turned it over in my palm, its iron spine catching the amber light leaking through the diner's blinds. The waitress pad under my arm was still blank, but my mind was spinning. Claire. My manager's voice cut through the low hum of the morning rush. Table 4's still waiting. I nodded, slid the key into my apron pocket like it was contraband, and forced my feet to move. I pasted on a smile topped off a trucker's coffee, jotted down a stale pancake order. But all I could think about was the look on Mr. Hollis's face when he'd handed me the envelope that morning. Theodore Whitmore's name had been scrawled in sharp, deliberate ink. My great-uncle. The one who never sent birthday cards. The one who skipped my mother's funeral. The one who, as far as I'd known, hadn't spoken my name aloud in 20 years. He was also dead. And apparently he'd left me something. Not something. A castle. I didn't go straight home after my shift. I drove. And drove. Until the roads got narrower and the towns more silent, until even the GPS gave up and my phone lost signal somewhere near Unity. It wasn't about checking the place out. Not yet. I just needed air. I needed space to think. By the time I got back to our apartment, it was nearly dark. I could hear Lucy's giggles through the door as she played with her stuffed rabbit, completely unaware that her mom's world had tilted sideways. She ran to me as I walked in, arms wide and eyes bright. "Mom, you're home, yeah, baby?" I whispered, hugging her close. "I'm home." But the word home suddenly felt fragile, temporary, like it might vanish if I blinked too hard. I microwaved boxed mac and cheese while she chattered about a science project. I nodded, smiled, and stirred. But I couldn't stop seeing the key. Couldn't stop hearing the lawyer's words. "Your uncle left you for Thornfield Castle." Like it was nothing. Like it was a house. Not something out of a haunted novel. Lucy noticed me zoning out. She crawled up beside me on the sagging couch, her head resting against my shoulder. Her small hand reached into my apron pocket. "What's this?" I froze as she pulled out the key. She gasped like she'd found buried treasure. "Mom, this looks like it opens a pirate ship. Close," I said quietly. "A castle." She sat up. "Wait. Really, really?" And then the question. The one I'd been asking myself all day. Why would a man who barely knew me leave me a castle in the middle of nowhere? Lucy looked at me with her usual fearless wonder. "Maybe it's magic." I laughed, but it came out hollow. "Or maybe it's cursed." Her eyes went wide. "Cool." I couldn't sleep that night. I sat by the tiny kitchen window, staring out at the flickering street lamp and the cracked pavement of our apartment complex. A police siren wailed a few blocks away. The ceiling above creaked as our neighbor stumbled around in work boots at 2 a.m. Lucy slept soundly, curled up in a blanket fort made from a chair and a coat rack. And in my hand again was the key. The logical thing to do would be to sell it. If it had land value, great. If it didn't, I'd burn the deed and forget it ever happened. We didn't need a castle. We needed a car that didn't stall in second gear, a rent payment without stress hives, grocery money that didn't require coupons. But something about the whole thing pulled at me. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was hope. Or maybe I just wanted to see what the hell someone thought I was worth. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in 6 months. Lucy packed a bag like we were going to Disneyland. Her explorer's kit included a flashlight, granola bars, a Polaroid camera, and a notebook she'd titled Secrets We Find. We left Bangor just after sunrise. The deeper we drove into northern Maine, the more the world changed. Roads narrowed into cracked pavement, then gravel, then dirt. The trees grew taller. The air is colder. A single wooden sign marked the turn-off Thornfield Lane private road. I slowed the car. "Are we almost there?" Lucy asked, face pressed to the glass. "I think so," she grinned. "This is going to be the best day ever." I didn't say what I was thinking. That this could be the biggest mistake I'd ever make. Maybe someone had left me a rotting ruin for a reason. And then we saw it. Through the trees hidden in the overgrowth, a pair of rusted iron gates stood crooked and yawning open. Vines had strangled the stone pillars. A single word, barely legible, was carved across the top in Gothic letters, Thornfield. Beyond the gates, the castle rose like a sleeping monster. Stone walls blanketed in moss, ivy curling over broken windows, turrets reaching skyward like bony fingers. It was grand and tragic all at once, a place forgotten by time. Lucy whispered, "Whoa." I parked at the edge of the gravel circle that might have once been a driveway. We got out slowly, our shoes crunching weeds and brittle leaves. Standing at the foot of the castle, I felt two things at once. This place didn't want us. This place had been waiting. Lucy held my hand tighter. "Still want to go in?" I asked. She nodded without hesitation. "We came all this way, right?" And I smiled despite myself. Then I pulled out the key. It slid into the front door's lock like it had been waiting decades for that moment. The mechanism groaned. The door creaked open, releasing a breath of stale air and dust. And with it, the first step into something far bigger than I'd ever imagined. As we crossed the threshold, neither of us saw the silver Mercedes parked a mile down the road, engine idling, windows tinted, watching. Waiting. The hinges wailed like something dying as the castle door groaned open. The scent hit the first mold-rot damp stone and time itself. I stepped inside, holding Lucy's hand, her flashlight beam slicing through the dusty gloom like a sword. The front hall stretched wide and high, its vaulted ceiling lost in shadows. Shafts of sunlight pierced the holes in the roof above, lighting up swirling galaxies of dust. Debris was scattered across the stone floor leaves. Bird feathers shattered glass old wood beams. And silence. The kind of silence that made you want to whisper even though you were the only people left in the world. Lucy's voice broke it. "This place is so big." I squeezed her hand. "Stick close, okay?" We crept farther inside. The light from the door behind us was swallowed quickly. To the left was a grand staircase, once probably magnificent, now sagging slightly in the middle, the banister covered in thick webs. To the right, a series of tall, arched doorways opened into empty rooms, some with decayed furniture still covered in stained white sheets, like ghosts clinging to their last form. Lucy ran her fingers along the peeling wallpaper and looked up in awe. "It's like the castles in storybooks. Only..." She paused. "Only what I asked." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "It's not just old Mom. It's like the trees don't want us here." A shiver ran up my spine. We continued down the hall. The castle didn't just feel abandoned. It felt suspended, like it had been frozen mid-breath waiting. Some rooms looked like people had left in a hurry. A cracked teacup sat on a dusty tray in one, a child's shoe in another. On the second floor, Lucy found a faded mural along the corridor wall of astrological constellations with stars outlined in gold leaf, now tarnished and flaking. "Can I take pictures?" she asked. Just don't touch anything, I replied, but my voice came out hushed, reverent. It wasn't just the dust or the grandeur. It was something under all that. A weight. A story still stuck in the walls. We returned to the main hall, and that's when I saw it. A tapestry hung to the right of the staircase, moth-eaten and mold-stained, its original design too faded to see clearly. But there, just barely peeking from behind it, was a thin wooden door, narrower than the others, almost hidden. I reached for the edge of the tapestry and peeled it back. Lucy gasped. Was that there before? No, I murmured. We walked right past it. The door was out of place. Newer wood, reinforced with a steel strip along the edge. The knob had a polished brass lock embedded with tiny compass points etched around the keyhole. It didn't match anything else in the house. I pulled the large key from my pocket, the same one that had opened the front door. It didn't fit. I tried the others I had on my ring car keys mailbox storage unit. Nothing. Lucy pressed her palm to the door. It's not just locked. It feels locked. Like... She paused, frowning on purpose. I didn't like how that sounded, or how right she was. Before I could say anything, a rustle echoed through the hall. I spun, but there was nothing. Just shadows shifting across broken windows. A door slammed somewhere deep in the castle. I grabbed Lucy's hand. Time to go. We backed out slowly, the heavy door closing behind us with a reluctant thud. Outside, the daylight had started to fade, turning the sky into a deep wash of gray and gold. I loaded Lucy back into the car, trying not to show how fast my heart was thudding. Are we leaving? She asked, buckling herself in. For now. We found a motel 10 miles south of one of those roadside joints with buzzing signs and keypads instead of card swipes. I didn't unpack. Just collapsed on the edge of the bed while Lucy unwrapped a granola bar and wrote in her notebook. Secrets we find, she'd scribbled in bold letters across the top. She was already sketching the castle, her version filled with twisting staircases, monster vines, and a crown above the hidden door. You okay? She asked without looking up. I nodded. Just tired. Was it scary? Yeah, I admitted. But also... weird. She set her notebook down. Do you think there's treasure? I wanted to laugh. Or cry. I don't know, baby. But I was starting to think there was something, maybe not gold or jewels, but something left behind on purpose. Something someone didn't want found. Later that night, long after Lucy had fallen asleep, curled up in the bed beside me, I sat alone by the window of the motel room. The air conditioner rattled behind me. Moths flicked against the outside light. And I kept staring at the key on the nightstand. Why would Theodore give it to me? He barely spoke to my mother, and never once reached out to me. I was the ghost of the family. The waitress. The mistake. But something in that house had been waiting for someone. For years. And now it had me. As I drifted towards sleep, my phone buzzed once. No caller ID, just a text. Don't open that door. I sat upright, heart pounding. I checked the window. Nothing but empty parking lot and pine trees. No reply. No signal. I turned off the phone, slid it under my pillow, and stared at the ceiling. What had I stepped into? The next morning, I made a stop before heading back to the castle. The local library was 2 blocks from the motel, tiny red-bricked with a crooked weather vane and a cat asleep in the window. Inside, it smelled like old paper and lemon cleaner. That's where I met her Maggie Gibbons hair in a silver braid cardigan, buttoned wrong, and eyes that missed nothing. You said, Thornfield, she asked, blinking up at me from the reference desk. Yes. Do you know anything about it? She stood slowly, pushed aside her teacup, and pulled down a key ring with a brass tag labeled Archive. "No one's asked about that place in years," she said softly, then added almost under her breath, "Some things get buried for a reason, Claire, not to hide them, but to keep them from waking up. And somewhere not far off in the forest, just outside the castle, someone else was waking up. Too quiet, deliberate, watching every move I made. Waiting." The man stepped out of the car like he owned the damn world. A tailored charcoal suit, shoes that had never met dirt, hair too silver to be stressed. This was money dressed as a person. He stood there, hands clasped behind his back, eyes drifting from the crumbling castle walls to my 10-year-old Honda, like he was comparing the ruins of empires. I instinctively stepped in front of Lucy. "Miss Whitmore," he said, voice smooth as polished marble. I didn't reply right away. My hand rested on the doorframe, ready to slam it shut if I had to. He gave a small, unreadable smile. "I represent a party very interested in this property." "Who are you, Richard Worthington?" He pulled a card from his pocket and handed it to me with 2 fingers. The cardstock was thick, the lettering embossed in gold. "Worthington and Lyon. Historical Asset Acquisitions. We'd like to make you an offer." I didn't look at the card. "We're not selling. You haven't heard the number yet." "I don't need to." He raised one brow like I'd said something quaint. "Most people in your situation, single parent, waitress income, no known assets, would at least be curious." I stepped out onto the cracked stone steps and folded my arms. Lucy stood behind me, her small hand clutching my shirt. "Miss Whitmore," he said, taking a small step forward, "you're standing on something worth far more than you realize, and far more dangerous, too." My mouth went dry. "What exactly do you think I'm standing on?" He smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. "We're collectors of historical properties. Thornfield has a unique past. World War II connections, rare architectural features, potential undiscovered artifacts. It's a liability for someone like you, but an opportunity for someone like us." Still not selling. He tilted his head. "Are you sure $500,000? Cash. No inspections, no questions." I blinked. 500,000. More money than I'd ever seen outside of tax forms and daydreams. Enough to move, start fresh pay for Lucy's education twice over. I stared at the card in my hand. Why would anyone pay that much for this? I asked, voice lower. His eyes flicked toward the castle. "Let's just say it's been watched for a very long time." That chilled me. "You're not the first Whitmore to come here, you know," he added casually. "But you might be the first to open that vault." "What vault?" He smiled again, like a teacher who already knew the student's answer. "We're prepared to go higher if necessary." I swallowed hard. "You said it was dangerous." "Why?" He gave a short, sharp breath of a laugh. "Miss Whitmore, there are some things in this world that hold value. Money, art, secrets. But the rarest thing of all is a thing lost to history until someone digs too deep. So you're saying I should walk away. I'm saying you should take the money and walk away before someone else decides to help you leave." That wasn't a warning. That was a threat wrapped in velvet. I stepped back toward the door. "We're done here." He handed me a second card. "Call any time. But don't wait too long. History isn't patient." He turned and walked back to his car. It pulled away without a sound, tires whispering against the overgrown gravel. I stood there long after he was gone, Lucy pressed close beside me. "Mom," she whispered, "I don't like him." "Me neither." That night I locked every door in the castle and shoved a chair under the front knob for good measure. Lucy drew in her notebook by flashlight, while I sat in the old kitchen with a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. The air felt heavier, thicker, like the house knew it had been mentioned, like it had heard the word vault and was holding its breath. I replayed Worthington's words again and again. Vault, secrets, danger. And worst of all, the way he said, "You're not the first." What the hell had I inherited? The next morning, I drove back to the library. Maggie was already waiting, 2 dusty boxes on the reading table and a steaming mug labeled "I read banned books" beside her elbow. "Something told me you'd be back," she said without looking up. "Have you ever heard of a man named Richard Worthington?" Her eyes flicked up sharply. "You spoke to him," I nodded. She frowned. "He's not from here." "Never was. But he pops up every few years when someone mentions Thornfield. Always with an offer. Always with a warning. You've met him once. A long time ago. Didn't like the way he looked at the archives. I told her everything, the card, the offer, the threat. She listened silently, fingers tapping against her mug. "He's right about one thing," she finally said. "This place has a history. Your great-grandfather, Cornelius Whitmore, was more than eccentric. He was involved in something during the war. The records are vague, lots of redactions. But Thornfield was used by the government in 1943. They called it a scientific outpost." "Outpost for what?" She shrugged. "Your guess is as good as mine. Some say it was for radar tech. Others whisper about cultural protection. You know, hiding things the Nazis might have stolen. Paintings, books, documents. That hit hard. I thought of the locked door, the compass symbols, the mural of stars. My fingers itched for the key again. Maggie slid a photo across the table. A grainy black and white shot of Cornelius Whitmore standing in front of the castle gates in a long coat and bowler hat. His eyes stared directly at the camera like he saw through time. "Your bloodline runs deep in this town," she said. "But so does its silence." I looked at the picture. Something in his stance, the way he stood angled slightly away, as if hiding something behind him. What was he protecting? She looked at me then. Maybe it wasn't about protection at all. Maybe it was about preservation. Maybe someone in your family believed that truth only survives if it's buried deep enough. I left the library with the boxes in the back seat and a headache building behind my eyes. But I had answers to find now. And maybe, just maybe, a vault to unlock. That afternoon I stood in the grand hall of Thornfield Castle, staring at the hidden door again. Brass glinting, compass etched, unopened. For now. Lucy came down the stairs behind me holding something. "Mom, where'd this come from?" It was a photograph, a newer one. A zoomed-in shot of the castle, taken from the tree line. I didn't answer, because I already knew we weren't alone. Not anymore. And someone out there didn't want me to open that door because they were afraid of what I might find when I did. The archive room in the library smelled like dust, lemon polish, and forgotten secrets. The windows were narrow and clouded, filtering the light into soft gray streaks that danced across the wooden floor. Maggie Gibbons moved like she belonged in the place, her cardigan sleeves pushed up, her silver braid trailing over her shoulder, hands steady as she unlocked a file cabinet older than both of us. I hadn't told her about the photo Lucy found. Not yet. She set a box down on the table with a heavy thump. Everything we've got on Thornfield. But fair warning, some files are redacted, others are missing altogether. The government came through back in the late 60s and sanitized half the historical records. Why, she met my eyes. Her voice was quieter now. Some things get buried for a reason, Claire, not to hide them, but to keep them from waking up. I swallowed hard. The box was labeled Whitmore Estate, 1935 to 1947. Its edges were frayed and someone had scribbled a red X on the side. Great-Grandpa Cornelius really knew how to stir up trouble, huh? I muttered. Maggie gave me a dry smile. He was brilliant, dangerous, both probably, but no one ever accused the Whitmores of being boring. I started digging through the papers, newspaper clippings, property maps, and yellowed correspondence. One letter dated 1942 caught my attention. To the Office of Strategic Services regarding the Thornfield installation. Experiments will require extended security clearance. Recommend full blackout of town records. OSS, I said aloud. Wasn't that the early CIA? Yep, predecessor. And if they were involved, it wasn't just radar tech. That's smoke. Always was. I pulled out a second article, brittle and brown at the edges. Whitmore Castle designated as federal property for national security purposes, 1943. Then nothing. No follow-up, no explanations. Just silence like the castle fell off the map. I sifted further until I found a black and white photo tucked in the bottom corner of the box. Cornelius again, but this time inside the castle. Behind him stood a large steel door, the same compass rose etched across its surface. My heart skipped. It was the door in the hallway, the one Lucy and I had found. I turned it toward Maggie. Was this taken in the vault? Her eyes narrowed. I've seen that door before in a blueprint, but no one's been inside since Cornelius. Not even my Uncle Theodore, no. He tried. Bought the place after your great-grandfather passed, but never once stepped foot inside. Sent men to assess it, but something always stopped him. Structural instability, bad luck, illness. One even disappeared. Disappeared. Maggie leaned back in her chair. Rumor, not fact. Town legend. But let's just say, Theodore believed the castle would only open for someone with the right blood and the right reason. I stared at the photo again. He'd been standing just slightly off-center, angled toward the camera but guarding the door with his body as if it were more than metal, as if it were a secret he'd vowed to keep. Back at the motel, Lucy sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping through her drawings. I spread the documents out on the bed, tracing timelines, trying to connect the dots. Operation Safeguard, OSS, a sealed door, family secrets. But the part I couldn't shake, the way Richard Worthington had said, "You're not the first to try." And now Maggie had confirmed it. I picked up the photo Lucy had found earlier, the one clearly taken from the tree line near the castle. Someone had been watching us. Maybe it still was. Mom, Lucy asked, looking up. Yeah, baby, if this is like one of those mystery movies. What happens when the treasure doesn't want to be found? I stared at her. What do you mean? She shrugged. You know, like it's cursed or something. Or it's protected. Maybe it only shows itself when someone needs it, not just wants it. That landed harder than it should have. Sometimes I think you're too smart for your own good, I whispered, ruffling her hair. She smiled. You say that like it's a bad thing. The next morning I returned to Thornfield alone. I told Lucy to stay at the motel just for a few hours. She protested, but I bribed her with cartoons and Pop-Tarts. I needed to see that door again. Needed to see if anything had changed. The castle was quiet when I arrived, quieter than usual, like it was listening. I moved through the front hall, quickly past the grand staircase and into the corridor, where the hidden door waited behind the tapestry. My fingers traced the edge of the molding, pulling the fabric back. Still there. Still locked. Still impossibly out of place. I stared at the compass etching again, my eyes narrowing. North, south, east, west, then 4 smaller stars between them. 8 total. I pulled the large brass key from my coat pocket, the one Theodore left me. I'd already tried it, of course. It didn't fit the lock, but now I looked closer. At the handle. At the tiny raised crest. A compass rose, the same as the door. I turned it over in my palm, rubbing the smooth metal. Then I felt a faint seam along the base of the handle. My breath caught. I pressed gently, then twisted. Click. The handle came loose. Inside, hidden within the shaft, was a second key. Thinner, simpler, older. My hands shook. I placed the new key into the lock. It slid in smoothly, but I didn't turn it. Not yet. Outside, I heard it again. A car engine. I froze, heart pounding. Slowly, I moved to the window and peeked through the dusty glass. A familiar car parked halfway down the road. Silver Mercedes, tinted windows. Richard Worthington. But this time he wasn't alone. 3 men stood beside him, all in suits, all stiff serious. One opened the trunk and pulled out a crowbar. I stepped back from the window, heart pounding like a drum. I looked at the door one last time. Then I ran. By the time I reached the car, I had one hand on my phone, the other on the ignition. I peeled out from the driveway, gravel spitting from my tires. My fingers tapped frantically as I dialed. 911. What's your emergency? I took a breath. My name is Claire Whitmore. I need to speak to the FBI's Art Crime Division. Now. As I sped down the winding road, the castle disappearing in the rearview mirror. I reached over and pulled the second key from my pocket. No matter what was behind that door, I was one turn away from finding out. And I was no longer alone in the search. The next morning, the wind blew harder through the motel's broken window pane, rattling the edge of Lucy's drawing notebook. She was still asleep, curled like a comma beneath a pile of hotel blankets. I sat at the small table by the window, the second key, the real one, spinning slowly between my fingers. The FBI hadn't returned my call yet. I didn't expect them to. Not until something actually happened, something someone could write a report about. Until then, I was alone. Well, not quite. You're the woman living up at Thornfield. The man standing outside my car was tall, broad-shouldered, mid-30s. Military haircut, sun-worn skin eyes like slate. He leaned against a rusted pickup truck, arms crossed as I pulled up to the local hardware store. I nodded, suspicious but curious. That obvious, he smirked. Small town. You don't drive a 2006 Honda with duct tape on the taillight and go unnoticed. I raised a brow. Are you following me? He straightened and extended a hand. Noah Langley. I work on old houses. Someone said you might need help. I hesitated before shaking it. Firm grip, warm palm, didn't flinch. I figured that was a good sign. What do you know about Thornfield? I asked. He tilted his head. Enough to know no one's touched that place in 40 years. The roof's probably rotted straight through. It is, I said. Among other things. I'm guessing you're not just looking for a roof patch. No, I'm looking for someone who won't ask too many questions about what I'm fixing. He nodded once. I'm not nosy, but I'm not stupid either. Then he said, almost like a challenge, you don't fix castles with tools. You fix them with belief. I blinked. That was unexpected. He shrugged. You gotta believe it's worth saving, or it's just stone and dust. By noon, we were standing in the east wing sunlight leaking through holes in the ceiling, like rain made of gold. Noah was quiet as he surveyed the damage, taking notes, pulling down half-collapsed plaster, with one practiced arm tapping stone with the flat of a screwdriver. I can patch the worst spots, he said, glancing up. But you're going to need a full crew if you ever want to live here. I'm not looking for luxury, I said. Just survival. He gave a soft snort. Castle survival. Now there's a new one. Lucy had insisted on coming. She wore her purple backpack and carried her notebook like it was sacred. She was currently exploring the main staircase, carefully mapping out each turn and carved detail like a miniature architect. Noah watched her for a moment. Your daughter, yeah. She's got good instincts. She's been watching everything. She gets that from me, I said, only half joking. I didn't tell him she'd also been waking up every night from nightmares. I didn't mention the text message, or the photo, or the 3 men with crowbars standing on this very driveway less than 24 hours ago. Instead, I handed Noah a flashlight and led him to the hallway with the hidden door. I wanted to see what someone like him would think of it. A stranger with sharp eyes and a war-built gut. He stood in front of the door for a long time, ran his fingers along the etchings, pressed his ear against the wood. Reinforced, he said. Steel inside, probably. You think you could break it down? He glanced at me, then back at the door. Sure, he said. But I won't. Why not? He looked at me carefully. Because whoever built this didn't want it forced open. They wanted someone to earn it. I pulled the small key from my pocket. He raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. I didn't unlock it. Not yet. I wasn't ready. That night we lit candles in the old kitchen and made soup from a camp stove on the stone hearth. The room was freezing, but it felt almost real. Life was starting to take root here, even if it was still tender and fragile. Noah stayed late helping us drag old furniture into place. He found a mattress that wasn't molded beyond salvation and helped me rig a tarp above the worst roof leaks. You think I'm crazy? I asked as we finished. He thought about it. A little bit. But sometimes crazy's just courage nobody understands. I smiled. Lucy dozed off on a pile of blankets near the fire. I stepped outside for air, and frozen. Headlights, again. But this time, not Worthington, not a Mercedes, just a car idling on the road. No one got out. No motion. Watching. I stepped back inside and locked the door. 3 days passed. During the day, we patched walls. Noah replaced some of the glass in the windows using salvaged panes. I paid him in cash and he accepted it without complaint. At night, I read every document Maggie had copied for me. I learned about Thornfield's designation as a wartime cultural repository, about Operation Safeguard, an OSS program designed to hide priceless art across the U.S. in the event of a Nazi invasion. Cornelius Whitmore hadn't just donated his home. He'd been a key player in the mission. Only, something had gone wrong. Because some of the paintings are listed on the inventory, they never made it home. They were supposed to be returned after the war, but they disappeared instead. and I was starting to believe they were still here, still inside that room. On the fourth night, I stayed up late studying the symbols on the lock again. Compass rose. 8 points. North clearly marked. Lucy had long since fallen asleep. Noah had gone home. I turned the key in my fingers, pressed it into the lock. Not turning yet, just fitting it. And it fit, like it had been waiting for decades to be touched. A breath escaped me I hadn't realized I was holding. I didn't open it, but I would. Soon. Outside, someone watched from the tree line. Not Worthington this time. A different silhouette. Shorter. Slither. Holding something in one hand. A camera. The next morning, Lucy held up her Polaroid. "I saw someone last night," she said. "Outside." I took a picture. My stomach twisted. The photo was blurry, dark, and grainy, but in the bottom corner, barely visible, was a hand, holding up a badge or maybe a gun. I wasn't sure which, but I was done waiting. "I need to know what's behind that door," I said aloud, mostly to myself, because whatever it was, it had already started to bleed into our lives. The hallway felt colder than usual, not because of the cracked windows or the damp stone underfoot, but because I knew this was it. Today, I was opening the door. Lucy was at the library with Maggie. Noah was picking up lumber from town. For the first time in days, I was alone inside Thornfield Castle, and I needed to be. I stood in front of the narrow wooden door, tucked behind the tapestry. The compass-shaped lock gleamed faintly in the afternoon light. The small key I'd found hidden inside the ornate one felt like it pulsed in my palm. It didn't shake. I did. I took a breath, placed the key in the lock, and lined up the compass rose so that north met north. Then I turned it. The mechanism gave a deep click, smooth, mechanical, precise. A second lock turned inside. Then a third. The door creaked once, then swung open on its own, revealing nothing but thick, stale darkness inside. I whispered the words out loud, like they were meant for someone else. Only a true Whitmore would think to look inside the key. The smell instantly hit: old paper, cold metal, and something sharper, oilier. Machine oil, maybe, or time. I flicked on my flashlight. It wasn't a room. It was a vault. Concrete walls. Reinforced ceiling. No windows. A single ventilation shaft in the corner. The temperature dropped instantly as I stepped inside, and the door gently swung shut behind me. The beam of my flashlight swept across the space. Filing cabinets. Shelves lined with crates. 3 long tables, each covered in layers of dust and canvas. I pulled back one of the tarps and gasped. Underneath were paintings, at least a dozen. Not prints, not copies. Paintings. Even in the dim, narrow light, the colors were vivid. A burst of sunflowers, a swirl of violet, the soft, unmistakable motion of brushwork that could only belong to masters. I dropped to my knees. The second tarp revealed more portraits, seascapes, city scenes that looked straight out of Paris in the 1800s. One corner was signed in looping black ink, M. Cassatt, Mary Cassatt. I remembered enough from high school art history to know that signature didn't belong in a forgotten castle in Maine. I moved to the filing cabinets. The first drawer stuck. The second slid open easily. Inside, authentication papers, certificates of provenance, photographs from 1938, 1939, 1940, each documenting shipments of artwork from Europe to America, all stamped with the same identifier, Operation Safeguard Whitmore Depot Nut 9. My heart pounded as I scanned names. Monet, Renoir, Degas, Cassatt. A small Rembrandt sketch. I moved to the final cabinet, and that's when I found the folder that stopped everything. It was labeled Confidential Hold for Personal Review C. Whitmore. Inside were pages of handwritten notes. Cornelius's handwriting was spidery, uneven, but precise. The entries became increasingly frantic near the end. Several crates returned to Europe under false pretenses. Owners provided forged documentation. Names do not match shipment logs. Several claimants have ties to Reich-affiliated firms, refusing to return works until identities are verified. Refusal met with pressure from the state. Legal threats incoming. No trust left in the system. Must protect works, hide if necessary. He hadn't just stored the art. He'd kept the pieces that were in dispute. That was being claimed by the wrong people, collaborators, thieves, opportunists who had no right. He'd sealed them away. And then he'd gone quiet. I sank to the floor, surrounded by the weight of history, some of it literal. This wasn't just some eccentric hoarding paintings. Cornelius had been trying to do the right thing. When the war ended and the lines blurred, he'd chosen to protect what was left of the truth. And now, all of that was mine, including the decision of what came next. Behind me, the door creaked. I spun around, flashlight raised, but it was only Lucy. She stepped inside cautiously, eyes wide. "Mom." I let out a shaky breath. "What are you doing here?" Maggie had to leave early. I didn't want to stay alone. She looked around the room, then at me. "Are these real?" I nodded. She walked over to one painting, a landscape of rolling hills and golden trees, and touched the edge of the frame gently. "Are we rich now?" I laughed, despite everything. "Maybe." But then I turned her to face me, kneeling, so we were eye to eye. "But these aren't really ours, baby. Not most of them." "Then whose are they?" I held up one of Cornelius's letters. Some belonged to people who were running from the Nazis. Some were taken from Jewish families. Some were meant for museums. Some, we don't even know who they belong to. Her brows furrowed. "So what do we do?" I looked around at everything Cornelius had left behind. Everything he'd protected. "We do the right thing," I said. "Even if it was complicated. Even if it meant walking into a storm." We spent the rest of the night in that vault. Lucy curled up under my coat and drifted off while I catalogued as much as I could. I found more names, more stories. Some pieces had original notes from families desperate to protect them. Some had documents written in French, German, Italian. And some were anonymous, no names, just art waiting to be remembered. I knew I couldn't protect this alone. The world had tried once to steal it all. And men like Worthington. They were still trying. I needed backup. At sunrise, I stepped outside into the cold morning air, phone in hand. First, I called a number Maggie had given me, the contact of a lawyer specializing in art repatriation. Her name was Joanna Kessler. She answered after 2 rings. "This is Kessler." I didn't waste time. "My name is Claire Whitmore. I found a vault. Paintings. Documents. Wututu. Hidden since the 40s. I think some of it was never returned after the war. Some of it might be stolen." There was a pause. Then her voice sharpened like a scalpel. "Don't tell anyone else. I'm on my way." She paused again. "And Miss Whitmore, until I get there, consider hiring armed security." "What are you describing? People would kill for it." I ended the call and stared up at the castle walls. The sun lit the moss in golden streaks, turning decay into beauty. Inside, history waited, and so did the people who wanted to steal it. I hadn't even opened the front gates when the sound reached me. Engines. Not a car this time. Motorcycles. 4 of them, roaring toward the castle. I turned and ran. "Lucy," I screamed. She was already at the window, her eyes wide. They were back. And this time they weren't coming to negotiate. The motorcycles stopped just beyond the gravel drive, tires crunching as they fanned out across the front of Thornfield Castle. 4 riders dressed in black helmets, still on like they'd stepped out of a heist film. One of them carried a satchel. Another dismounted slowly and approached the steps with an air of ownership that made my skin crawl. I pulled Lucy back from the window and crouched in front of her. "You go down to the vault," I whispered. "Take the flashlight, lock the door behind you. No matter what you hear, don't open it until I come for you." Her eyes widened, fear flashing fast and sharp. "What about you? I'll be okay." "But Mom, I need you to be brave right now." She nodded, lips trembling, then turned and disappeared into the hall. I grabbed the crowbar Noah left in the kitchen and shoved it into my belt like a makeshift weapon. My hands were sweating, but I kept my spine straight as I opened the front door. The leader's helmet, now off, wasn't Richard Worthington. He was younger. 30s, maybe. Buzzed hair, small scar under his left eye. He smiled like we were neighbors meeting for coffee. "Claire Whitmore," he said. "So nice to finally meet you in person." I didn't respond. He gestured at the castle. "You've got something that doesn't belong to you." I stepped onto the top step. "Funny, I was about to say the same to you." He tilted his head, still smiling, and said, "You think this is about art, it's about power. And power doesn't care who painted it." The words hit like a slap. He motioned to his crew, who fanned out. One disappeared around the back. Another tested the window frames. The third stood by the bikes, clearly acting as a lookout. "I'd prefer not to tear the place apart," Scarface said. "Let's keep this civilized. You bring us what's behind the door. You walk away rich. Kid gets a scholarship or whatever. Everyone wins. You've got the wrong idea. I'm not some frightened heiress. I know what's in that vault. I know who it was stolen from." He laughed. "That's the thing about history, it belongs to whoever holds it." I took a step forward, heart thundering. "You don't get to rewrite it." His smile faded. "Then I guess we'll have to dig it out." He signaled. 2 men surged toward the house. I slammed the door and bolted it, heart hammering. They hit it hard twice before switching tactics and heading for the side entrances. I sprinted down the hall yelling, "Lucy, lock it, now." I reached the tapestry and heard the vault door click shut behind her. Seconds later, a side window shattered. They were inside. The kitchen became a battlefield of noise. I flipped the heavy dining table onto its side, turned over shelves to block the hallway. My only weapon was the crowbar, and even that felt like a joke. I heard boots on the stone floor, fast and determined. Then, bang. Front door cracked. Crash. One of them kicked open the parlor. I ducked low, adrenaline surging. Then a voice. "Claire." "It's me." I blinked. "Noah." Noah burst through the broken side door, wielding a sledgehammer like it was a sword. He swung at the nearest man, a thug in all black, and the guy crumpled instantly. "You said call if it got weird," he said, panting. "This counts as weird." Together we fought like cornered animals. We used the castle to our advantage, its labyrinth of halls, the broken furniture, the tight doorways. We blocked, we dodged, we struck. It wasn't clean, it wasn't heroic, but we held them off long enough. Long enough for blue and red lights to splash across the windows. Sirens, the real kind. They wailed like justice finally woke up. Worthington's men scattered 2 bolts through the back, one leaping out a shattered window. The last tried to run through the hall, but was tackled by 2 local cops seconds later. Noah and I stood panting, scraped, bruised. I looked at him. "You good?" He nodded. I've had worse first dates." He barked a short laugh. "We're calling this a date now." Outside, the cops cuffed the last guy and loaded him into the cruiser. An unmarked car pulled up behind them. A woman stepped out, tall coat trailing behind her sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Claire Whitmore?" she asked. I nodded, breath still catching. "Joanna Kessler," she said. "You called me." An hour later, Lucy emerged from the vault unharmed but shaken. Kessler stood in the grand hall surrounded by cops, preservation experts, and 2 men with cases labeled Smithsonian Security. The door to the vault remained open now. Kessler had seen the art, the documents, the full truth. "This isn't just stolen art," she said quietly. "This is evidence of one of the most deliberate cultural thefts in wartime history." "What is your family protected? It could reset the global ledger." I looked around at the damage, the broken furniture, shattered windows, bruises on Noah's jaw. "It already reset mine," I said. She smiled tightly. "The FBI will want to talk to you. But you're safe for now." "No," I said. "I'm not." She raised an eyebrow. I reached into my pocket and handed her the Polaroid Lucy had taken, the one with the blurry figure. She studied it for a long moment. "That's not one of Worthington's men." "I know," I said. "Whoever that is, they're next." That night, after everyone cleared out, Noah stayed to board up the windows. Lucy curled beside me under an old blanket as we sat on the kitchen floor, drinking instant cocoa from mismatched mugs. "I was really scared," she whispered. "I know, baby. You didn't give them the paintings." "No. And I never will." She thought about that. Then, "Even if they come back," I stared into the dying fire. "If they come back," I said, "they'd better bring more than crowbars." Upstairs, in one of the few rooms untouched by the chaos, I found something I hadn't noticed before. Tucked behind a crumbling bookshelf. A second vault. Smaller. Hidden. No key. No markings. Just a heavy iron door with a thumb-sized hole in the center. Like it needed something else. Something I didn't have yet. A second key, maybe. Or a final answer. And suddenly I understood. The vault I'd opened wasn't a secret. It was just the beginning. The room smelled like cold stone and secrets. I stood in front of the second vault, the smaller one, the one tucked behind the bookshelf in the upstairs study, as the wind clawed at the broken window behind me. The hole in the door wasn't just decorative. It was deliberate. Thumb-sized, circular, perfectly smooth. I pressed my finger into it. Nothing happened. No click. No shift. Just cold metal and silence. This wasn't about brute force. It was about understanding. I grabbed a flashlight and turned the beam toward the walls. Unlike the first vault, this one didn't announce its importance. There were no signs, no labels, no old crates. Just a locked iron door, and the feeling that it had been waiting quietly, patiently, for someone to come looking. Then I saw it etched into the stone frame, almost invisible in the dim light, were the words, "The truth was never lost, only hidden by those too afraid to carry it." It sent a chill through me. Who had hidden this Cornelius, or someone after him, and what truth was too dangerous to speak out loud? Downstairs, Lucy and Noah were finishing breakfast. Joanna Kessler had stayed in town meeting with federal contacts and planning the first stages of repatriation for the paintings. The news hadn't broken publicly yet, but it would. Soon. And once it did, Thornfield wouldn't just be a curiosity. It would be a war zone. I poured myself coffee from the percolator Noah found in the basement and sat across from Lucy. "Baby," I said gently. "Remember that notebook Grandpa Theo left?" She nodded. "The one with all the symbols, do you still have it?" She dug into her bag and handed it to me, the leather-cracked pages yellowed but intact. "I think this vault upstairs needs a different key," I said. "Not a metal one. Maybe something else." Noah leaned forward. "Like what I don't know yet." But Cornelius never did anything randomly. If he hid 2 vaults, it's because he knew one wouldn't be enough. I tapped the notebook, then looked at both of them. This wasn't just about protecting art. It was about protecting the story no one wanted to tell. That afternoon, I returned to Maggie's library with the notebook, hoping to cross-reference symbols. She met me at the door, her expression tense. "There's something you need to see," she said. She led me to a corner of the reading room, where old newspapers were spread across the table. Someone slipped this through the drop slot last night. The front page of a 1951 New York Ledger stared back at me. The headline read, "Whitmore family under investigation for missing European art." Subheader: "Anonymous tip alleges secret vaults and post-war theft." I scanned the article. The language was vague. No names, no proof, but the insinuation was clear. Cornelius had been accused, and someone had tried to bury him under the weight of his own legacy. The tip came from inside the town, the same town that now whispered about curses and missing men. "What happened to this story?" I asked. Maggie pointed to the follow-up, a retraction 2 weeks later buried on page 9. "No evidence found. Sources disappeared. The journalist who'd written it moved to Chicago and never published again. Classic smother and bury tactic. Whoever wanted Thornfield silenced," she said, "was powerful enough to erase this, and scared enough to try." I spent the next few hours digging through records with Maggie's help. We found references to Cornelius's post-war letters, private correspondence with American museums, resistance archives in France, and even the Vatican. Most of them were missing. But one folded between the pages of an old tax document remained. It was addressed to Isabelle Laurent, a French resistance courier turned art historian. Dated 1948. "Isabelle, if anything happens to me, follow the star. It leads to the gate. The real one. The others won't understand. They think the paintings are the treasure. They're not. The ledger matters more." I sat back, pulse quickening. The ledger. That had to be what was hidden behind the second vault. Not paintings, not artifacts. Names, real ones, families, owners, stolen heritage buried to protect reputations. Back at Thornfield, I returned to the upstairs study and inspected every wall panel, every tile, every inch of flooring. Lucy joined me, flipping through the notebook, eyes darting between symbols. "Mom," she said, stopping suddenly, "look." She pointed to a page labeled "The Astral Map," a star chart with compass markings and handwritten annotations. In the margin, gate, Auxer's Orion's Belt Vault, 2 true north, Orion's Belt. I turned back to the vault and shone the flashlight along the upper molding. After a moment, I spotted 3 tiny stars carved into the stone, lined up perfectly. A star map right above the door. "Line it up," I muttered. Lucy helped me measure using the notebook's diagram. We realized the door wasn't just locked, it was misaligned, deliberately, to protect it from opening unless you knew the celestial code. We rotated the compass notch on the doorframe hidden under a false panel and heard it click softly into place. Still no opening. Noah stepped into the room just then. "What's going on? We aligned it to Orion," I said. "But there's still a trigger missing." Lucy frowned. "What if it's not a thing we use?" "What do you mean?" She hesitated. "What if it's—" A voice, I blinked. Cornelius had been a scientist, but also romantic. A man who believed in art, in stories, and in legacy. I stepped forward and looked at the door, my heart thudding. Then I whispered the words Cornelius wrote to Isabel. "The paintings are not the treasure. The ledger matters more." There was a beat of silence. Then the vault hummed. The door shifted inward with a deep grinding sound. Stone moved, locks released. Air hissed out like a held breath finally exhaled. And then it opened. Inside was a single table surrounded by walls lined with empty scroll racks and burned-out sconces. At the center sat a steel box. Modern, government-issued. I stepped forward slowly, then opened the lid. Inside was a black leather-bound book. The pages were crisp, neatly organized, a full ledger of ownership claims, cross-referenced, verified, annotated with family names, shipping routes, museum transfers, war crimes, even Nazi party affiliations. This wasn't just documentation. This was the blueprint for restitution. It would destroy reputations, trigger lawsuits, correct the lies that had lasted for 80 years. And somewhere I knew Richard Worthington was waiting, because if this ledger became public, his name would be on it. I turned to Noah. We just found the bullet that could bring them all down. That night I didn't sleep. Neither did Lucy. I sat by the fire ledger in my lap, hands trembling with the weight of it all. And somewhere out in the dark, I knew eyes were watching again, waiting for us to slip, to crack, to be afraid. But I wasn't. Because now I hold something more dangerous than money or paintings or secrets. I held truth, and I was ready to burn the whole system down with it. Rain hammered the castle roof like 1,000 fists, thunder rolling above Thornfield, like an angry god had come to collect a debt. The ledger sat open on the dining table, pages fanned out, my fingers trembling as I highlighted another name. Richard Worthington. There it was, plain as day, connected to a post-war art acquisition fund traced back to a Swiss intermediary in 1952. The document didn't accuse him directly of theft, but it showed he'd bought disputed works from someone with ties to the Reich. And the kicker, he knew. The annotations made it clear. One margin note even said confirmed prior provenance suppressed for discretion. That was enough. Enough for a lawsuit. Enough for a scandal. Maybe even enough for prison, depending on how deep his involvement went. I stood back from the table and whispered to no one. He didn't want the vault. He wanted the silence. Noah looked up from his seat near the fire. His brow furrowed. "You're sure this ties him in directly?" "I don't need a confession," I said. "I need a spotlight. Once the press sees this, once Kessler makes it public, Worthington's finished." He nodded slowly. "What's the plan? I'm calling a press conference. Tomorrow. And if he shows up," I met his gaze. "Then we end it." Joanna Kessler arrived before dawn, trench coat soaked and folder clutched like a weapon. She took one look at the ledger, another at me, and said, "Are you ready to go to war?" "Absolutely." She spread out a timeline on the kitchen island, cross-checking shipping manifests, museum acquisitions, and previously sealed wartime documents. The depth of her knowledge was terrifying and impressive. "Worthington's name has come up before," she said. But every time he's buried it with settlements and NDAs. This, she tapped the ledger, makes that impossible. Noah looked skeptical. What if he still tries to make it disappear? Kessler smiled grimly. Then we make it louder. We spent the day scanning the full contents of the ledger. Lucy helped carefully turning the pages, labeling files, and taking notes. She worked like it mattered, like she understood that truth wasn't just facts, it was legacy. At 5 p.m., we emailed the scans to 5 major news outlets. At 5:30, I called the local paper and told them we'd be holding a press conference on Thornfield's front lawn at noon the next day. By 6:00, Kessler had arranged for 2 armed security guards from a private firm in Boston. It felt official now, unstoppable. But that was the danger, because nothing draws predators like the scent of blood. That night, Lucy couldn't sleep. She sat on the windowsill in the guest room, knees to her chest, staring into the black woods. "He's going to come here," she said softly. I sat beside her. "He might try. He doesn't want the truth." "No," I said. "But I do." She turned to me. "Will he hurt you?" I paused. "Then he might try." She nodded slowly, not crying, not panicking, just accepting it like someone far older than her years. "Then I'll stay with you," she said, "even if it gets scary." I hugged her tight, because I knew tomorrow would be the storm. At sunrise, the first reporter arrived, the 3 more. By 10:30 a.m., there were 2 news vans, a drone overhead, and a dozen cameras pointed at the steps of Thornfield Castle. I wore a black coat and stood straight-backed beside Kessler, Noah, and Lucy. The ledger rested on a podium we'd set up using salvaged wood from the library wing. I spoke first. "Good morning. My name is Claire Whitmore. Until a month ago, I was a single mom from Detroit trying to survive." Pause. Breathe. But what I inherited wasn't just a moss-covered ruin. It was a story one my family protected, one the world forgot, and one powerful man tried to bury. I opened the ledger and held it up. These documents prove that art stolen during World War II, art meant to be returned to families, to history, was instead hidden, sold, and profited from by individuals who knew exactly what they were doing. The cameras flashed. Reporters murmured. I turned a page, and one of those individuals is Richard Worthington. That's when the black SUV pulled up. He stepped out like a politician in a ribbon-cutting, tailored coat, expensive smile hair swept back. No fear, no hesitation, just contempt. He didn't walk up the steps. He walked through the crowd right to the base of the stairs. "This is slander," he said loud enough for the cameras to catch. "You've stolen private documents. You've invaded a home protected under historical preservation law." "No," Kessler said calmly. "She inherited it. Legally. As did all contents within." His jaw twitched. "You have no idea the forces you're messing with." "Oh," I said, stepping forward, "I know exactly who I'm messing with, and they're afraid of sunlight." He stepped up one stair, but the guards moved, and suddenly he wasn't in control anymore. A reporter shouted, "Mr. Worthington Care, to comment on your financial link to Swiss firm Bellman Holdings." Another, "Do you deny these paintings were sold through you post-war?" His face darkened. But the real crack came when Lucy stepped forward. She looked right at him. Not scared, not angry, just sad. "My grandpa tried to protect them," she said. "You tried to erase him." Worthington froze, because at that moment he wasn't being challenged by lawyers or activists. He was being held accountable by a kid, and the crowd knew it. He left in silence, escorted to his SUV by his own driver. No cameras followed. Everyone stayed with us. Because the story wasn't his anymore. It was ours. That night the news exploded. Articles, TV specials, social media campaigns. Museums from around the world reached out. Survivors' families started contacting Kessler. Jewish heritage groups offered assistance. The world was watching now. And there was no putting the genie back in the vault. After midnight, while Lucy slept and the castle was finally still, Noah found me in the upstairs study. He held out something in his palm. A medallion, bronze, slightly tarnished, etched with the Whitmore family crest. I found it behind one of the broken flagstones, he said. Thought it was just decoration, but... He pressed it into the thumb-sized hole in the third vault. A click. A whirl. A low mechanical thunk. And then the panel behind the vault began to slide. Another chamber. One even smaller. Inside a single metal cylinder. I unscrewed the cap. Inside was a strip of film. Old, delicate, but clearly legible. It showed Nazi officers posing beside a crate marked Whitmore Storage, and one of them, clear as day, was Richard Worthington's father. I turned to Noah and whispered, "Now we don't just have a scandal. We have proof of a cover-up that started generations ago." He stared at the photo and said, "Then we finish what your family started. Because the war, it was still going, and now we had the ammunition to win." The film strip trembled in my hands, a piece of time held together by dust and truth. The image, stark, undeniable, wasn't just a snapshot of the past. It was a weapon. And now that we had it, the storm Richard Worthington had been dodging for decades was finally bearing down. The next morning, I didn't sleep, didn't eat. I just stared at that frame again and again, trying to figure out how deep the rabbit hole went. The man on the left, young, crisp SS uniform, arrogant posture, was definitively Franklin Worthington, Richard's father. And behind him, stamped clearly on a crate half buried in snow, Whitmore Depot 9 Secure Hold. That one image rewrote everything. No longer speculation. No longer whispers or suggestions. This was collusion. Joanna Kessler arrived before sunrise with her usual steel in the veins calm, but when I showed her the film strip, her mask cracked. She leaned closer, exhaled slowly. "Jesus Christ. Yeah. You know what this means?" "It proves Richard's wealth is built on looted art," I said, "and that his father was involved in the original transfer. Not just buying after the fact." "No," she said. "It's bigger than that. This could implicate multiple families' foundations, even museums that claim to have clean hands. If Franklin Worthington helped distribute the looted works under Operation Safeguard, then we're not talking about smuggling anymore. We're talking about state-sanctioned laundering." She nodded grimly. "Claire," she said, voice low and heavy, "this isn't just about justice anymore. It's about rewriting the legacy of power." The next 24 hours blurred into a hurricane of phone calls, encrypted file transfers, legal advisories, and flash drives handed off in parking lots like something out of a Cold War thriller. Noah handled security. He set up cameras, changed the locks again, and stationed 2 guards near the castle gates full-time. Lucy stayed home from school. I didn't want her anywhere but near me. We scanned the film and embedded it in an updated media packet sent to every major outlet from CNN to BBC to Der Spiegel. We also forwarded it to 3 war crimes archives in Berlin, Tel Aviv, and Washington, D.C. By noon, I received confirmation the man in the photo had been officially identified as SS Hauptsturmführer Franklin Worthington, embedded in the Nazi Kunstschutz division, responsible for cataloging and transporting hooted art across Western Europe. And his record, scrubbed post-war, vanished until now. At 2:43 p.m., Richard Worthington called my phone directly. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "Claire, you've made your point, but you've also made enemies, ones you don't even know yet. I'm offering you one last chance to walk away. Sell the materials to me. We both disappear. You never have to fight again." I forwarded it to Kessler without responding. At 3:10 p.m., our castle internet went down. By 3:25, we were hit with a DDoS attack on all media hosting our documents. Someone was trying to shut it all down. Noah called a cyber team from Boston who'd worked with Kessler before. They rerouted everything through backups in under an hour. But the message was clear. This was war. That evening, a convoy of black cars pulled up outside Thornfield. For a second, my heart stopped. But it wasn't Worthington. It was the Justice Department. And with them, agents from the art crime team of the FBI, along with a representative from Interpol and the Commission for Looted Art in Europe. They'd received our documents, the ledger, the film, the complete case files compiled by Kessler. Their expressions said everything they weren't here to ask. They were here to act. Ms. Whitmore, the lead agent, said, extending a hand, "I need to inform you that your family estate is now a federally secured site under joint jurisdiction until restitution proceedings can be formally established." "What does that mean?" "It means you're protected," he said. "And it means Worthington just lost his ability to bury any of this." Kessler smiled like a lioness seeing a wounded gazelle. "We gave them access to the vaults. We walked them through every box, every signature, every hidden door." Lucy followed the agents with a notepad, asking questions like a tiny investigative journalist. At one point, she turned to me and said, "Do you think Grandpa Theo knew all of this?" I thought of the layers of encryption, the keys inside keys, the codes that spanned continents and decades. I think I said he knew enough. By midnight, the agents had secured copies of everything and left 2 federal marshals to stay on site. Kessler took me aside near the courtyard. The fog was rolling in heavy again, curling around the old stones like breath. "They'll go public with the findings within a week," she said. "And when they do, Worthington's foundation will collapse. The board will resign. His accounts will be frozen. But he's not going to disappear quietly." "No. But he's cornered now. Desperate men make mistakes." I looked up at the castle's high towers, the weather-worn gargoyles peering down like guardians. "What happens after?" I asked. Kessler hesitated. "That's the part no one talks about." "You mean the fallout, I mean the void." Later that night, after Lucy fell asleep, beside an open textbook about restitution law, I walked the halls of Thornfield alone. Every creak of the wood felt older now, heavier. I walked past the first vault, past the second, and into the third, the tiny chamber that had held the film strip. On the back wall, something had changed. There was an envelope, pinned beneath a brass plaque I hadn't noticed before. "Claire, for when the noise becomes too loud. C.W." My chest tightened. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single line written in Cornelius's sharp, elegant script. "Truth must be protected, yes, but sometimes it must also be passed on before it consumes you." Folded inside the note was a deed to Thornfield Castle, but not just to the property, to its contents, its archives, its secrets. Signed over in full to Lucy Whitmore. I sat on the cold floor and cried, not from fear, not from exhaustion, from relief, because Cornelius had planned all of it, not just for justice, but for her, for the next generation, to hold the light even when the world kept trying to turn it off. And I knew what I had to do next. Not just win, preserve. Not just burn it all down. Build something from the ashes. Because this wasn't the end. Not even close. The final confrontation was still coming. But now, for the first time since this all began, I wasn't afraid. Because I wasn't alone. And because the truth wasn't just mine to carry anymore. The night was unnaturally quiet. No wind, no rain, no owls calling from the trees. Just a thick, pulsing silence that felt like the air before a bomb goes off. I stood on the western balcony of Thornfield, the envelope from Cornelius still in my hand. The deed had been real, legally binding. And now Lucy didn't just inherit the castle, she inherited the burden. The legacy, the threat. Noah appeared behind me with 2 mugs of black coffee and a flashlight tucked in his belt. "You look like you haven't blinked in an hour," he said, handing me a cup. "I don't think I have." He leaned on the railing beside me. "You know this ends tomorrow." "Yeah." "You know he's not going to come alone. I'm counting on it." He glanced sideways at me, then said, "Claire, just because you're ready to die for this doesn't mean you should have to." I didn't answer right away. Because he was right. But it was never about whether I was ready to die. It was about whether I was ready to finish what started 80 years ago. Just after dawn, the call came through on the secured line. Kessler answered, her voice low and cold. She turned to me. "He's coming." "Worthington." She nodded. "His lawyers requested a private meeting on site. Off the record. They claim he wants to settle." I nearly laughed. Settle, probably a distraction. But it's our only chance to see what he's really afraid of. Noah tightened his grip on his tool belt. "Are we ready?" "We've been ready." I went to wake Lucy, but she was already dressed, sitting on the floor of the library with Cornelius's notebook open across her knees. She looked up with those steel-gray eyes that never flinched anymore. "I think I found something you missed," she said. Downstairs, Kessler was already coordinating with the FBI team. 2 agents stationed near the gate,